Hey, small business people and lovers of good stories in general. Welcome to episode 23 of Small Business War Stories. And today's episode is awesome. It's really, really cool. It's one of the people that I really wanted to interview. His name is Ben Blackwell. He's one of the co-founders of Third Man Records. And if you are at all a fan of rock music, blues music, Jack White is the one of the other partners in Third Man Records, and Third Man Records was originally started, as Ben will go into, as a way to publish out-of-print titles for the White Stripes, and then it became its own powerhouse of a record label. With now it has offices in Nashville, and then it has a really cool store in Detroit. I went through both of them on my trip. And they're also branching out way beyond the White Stripes catalog and signing exciting new artists all over the place. So they are kicking ass, taking names, and it was really cool to learn the story about how basically what was a rock band and ended up leveraging their catalog into a really successful record label. And they are the cool thing about Third Man is that they're also participating in the revitalization of Detroit. They opened a vinyl pressing plant there, and Ben will talk a little bit about that. Ben is actually a Detroit native, so I'm really, really excited about this episode. The episode is a part of the Soul of America tour, and every Soul of America tour episode is brought to you by Tecovas Boots. Tecovas is an amazing boot company based here in Austin. I wore their boots every single day during my trip across America. Got lots of compliments, and they sell directly to consumer. So all the savings are passed on directly to you, and the profits will usually go to the retailer, go to you. And if you go to tecovasboots.com, you can check them out. TECOVAS boots.com. The episode is also brought to you by Impact Crates. The Impact Dog Crates, they are made in the USA. They're strong, safe, and secure, and they're available in many different colors, and they're collapsible. So I was able to take the crate in and out of my truck every single day by myself, and it's a really, really sturdy and portable crate. If you want to check them out, you should go to Impact Crates and use code MUDDY20, MUDDY20, to get 20% off of your Impact Crate, and that's in honor of Muddy Waggers, my pup that came with me on the trip. And the episode is also brought to you by Badger Mapping. Badger is the #1 app for field salespeople. You can use it to plan your routes. It makes it very efficient for you to go from point to point. I use it during my 4,000-mile trip. So if you have a sales territory or you work with people who have sales territories, it can be a very effective planning tool. And every episode of Small Business War Stories is brought to you by Proven. Proven is a company I started with my business partner, Sean, and we are a leading small business hiring tool. We make small business hiring very easy. You don't have to go around posting to all these job boards. You can basically post to one place, and we distribute it very widely, and then you can check everybody out on your phone or on your computer and collaborate with your coworkers to hire the right person. Thousands of small businesses use Proven, and there is a free trial. So go over to proven.com and check it out, and you can sign up there. And I don't want to hold back anymore because this is a really, really cool episode where I sat down at Third Man Records in Nashville, Tennessee, with Ben Blackwell in episode 23. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. And we are live here in Nashville, Tennessee, here at Third Man Records. And I have the pleasure of sitting today here with Ben Blackwell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, no problem. Yeah, it's awesome to be here in Nashville. And we're going to get into a lot of different things related to vinyl and the vinyl revival and what it's been like to start this business. But before we get into that, I do have to ask you about your glasses in your senior picture. What is it? What is the deal?
Glasses in my senior picture.
Yes, the folks at Third Man Detroit told me that I had to at the pressing plant there. Told me that there was something related to your glasses in your senior picture that I had to ask you about.
I'm not wearing glasses in my senior picture, which is all the more confusing.
Wow. I'll have to text him back. And
I did go to high school with one of the guys that we ended up hiring to run the pressing plant in Detroit.
Okay.
Brandon Chernowski. He, independent of us going to high school with each other, he just happened to be the guy that was qualified for the job and knew other folks that were starting the plant.
Okay.
Was
there anything special about your senior picture?
My senior... Oh, I know what he's talking about. Okay. No, I was thinking of like the portrait that they run in the yearbook, which is just me, suit coat and a tie, standard Catholic high school kind of fare. But the one where they let you pose and pick what you're wearing and all that shit, I was wearing a jean jacket and sunglasses.
Oh,
like my cool look when I was 17.
That's awesome.
That's clearly what they're talking about.
Is that picture been published anywhere? You should put it out now.
I'll get a hold of my mom after this.
That's awesome.
I don't know if I have it anywhere.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see his glasses. Awesome. Well, yeah, it's really cool to be here. I mean, this is a record label that's really made a huge bet on vinyl. So I'd love to maybe get a little bit of the history of how did Third Man Records get started. Jack White was a big part of that. And you guys are both from Detroit, right?
Correct.
So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit of the story, like what inspired you. I mean, you've been involved in music for a while.
Yeah. So Third Man starts. It starts to only exist on paper, and that's in about 2001, when the White Stripes, they start signing deals with bigger labels, with like proper record labels, and in that process, the band creates Third Man Records as an entity.
Okay.
That licenses the band's catalog to these other labels.
Okay.
It's basically kind of an insurance policy.
Okay.
So that the major labels wouldn't just own the masters in perpetuity, and that the catalog would revert back to the band after 10 years or so.
Got it.
And that's how it goes from 2001 to about 2009.
Yeah.
In 2008, I get a call from Jack saying, "Hey, I bought this building in Nashville. Let's start the label for real.
Okay.
Let's the rights on certain number of the White Stripes albums have reverted back to us.
Yeah.
And they're out of print in the United States. Let's put those out. Like let's get those going. And like side note, like maybe we'll put out like one or two new records. But really, like let's just do the White Stripes catalog, Third Man Records."
What's the origin of the name Third Man?
So Third Man goes back to when Jack started his professional career was as a upholsterer.
Okay.
This is in the 90s. And the name of his upholstery shop was Third Man Upholstery.
Oh, okay.
Third Man goes back to a film by Orson Welles called The Third Man. Jack was a big Orson Welles fan, but he was also the third upholsterer to come from his block that he grew up on in Detroit.
Okay.
So it kind of had that double meaning. And everything at...
It's almost like the seventh son of a seventh son.
Well, he is a seventh son, too.
Right.
He's a seventh son of a seventh daughter, I think.
Okay.
So that's why he has all of his magical powers. So Third Man Upholstery, everything in the shop was yellow or black, all of his tools. He had a big yellow delivery van. And so we kind of carried the yellow and black to the label. And come 2009, we're set up and we're putting out records with a completely different approach because of the Dead Weather. The Dead Weather forms, and they write and record an entire album, and we spent our first year basically selling that record and the singles off of it, and them going on tour and starting a fan club, and not reissuing any White Stripes stuff for another year or so.
Yeah.
And that's always been constant in what we're doing every year or so. We've got some big White Stripes reissue or some archival thing.
Yeah, I saw that when you guys released at South by Southwest in your yellow van, you guys had the like special kind of. It was almost like hand-printed cover of the...
Yeah. We did
that's right.
For the pressing plant opening, we did silk screen covers and we did colored vinyl.
Yeah. My buddy Eric Wiseman, who's a big fan of all the White Stripes catalog, bought one of them.
Oh, nice.
We were at Willie Nelson's range.
Oh, yeah. So, and that's an example of stuff that we can kind of do whenever, however we want.
Yeah.
When you own the catalog, you have a special event like opening a pressing plant. Let's press the records that were recorded in the same neighborhood as that plant.
That's cool.
As it were.
That's cool. So was vinyl a big part of the label from the very beginning, or was that something? I mean, maybe like taking a half step back, help me trace a little bit of like you're a big collector of 45, so you've been into this stuff for a while. But how has the general market? What's been the arc of this kind of vinyl revival that's been going on for probably about a better part of a decade now?
Yeah, the vinyl has always been a part of, I think first starting out, it's part of the White Stripes story. So their first releases are all vinyl 45s. Everything they've ever done has been put out on vinyl. There's never really been stuff that only came out on CD or digitally, things of that nature. So the White Stripes story is pretty much intertwined with the Third Man story as well. Like I said, this is a label that was started to reissue all their catalog.
Okay.
As I see kind of vinyl as a, quote unquote market force, it definitely felt, my entry into it in the business side or the label side of things is probably 98, 99. And, collecting probably 4 or 5 years before that. And it just seemed like from when I got in, which was, like I said, 99 or so, until even through, I think, like 2009 when we started here, those 10 years seemed pretty flatlined.
Okay.
I didn't necessarily see any growth. I didn't necessarily see any shrinkage in market. It seemed like it just remained the same.
Yeah.
I was operating on a fairly small level, though, too. When you're doing singles by bands no one's ever heard of.
Sure.
The difference between 300 and 500 copies, really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't indicate any larger market forces.
Right.
But coming here, 2009 to about 2010 or 11, started seeing this. I remember the second Dead Weather album, See Ya Cowards, that came out in 2010.
Yeah.
We hit a moment where we couldn't press the records fast enough.
Yeah.
There was like a backlog at the plant a little bit.
Yeah.
The National was printing High Violet at the same time, their album that was coming out right around that same time.
Yeah.
And that was completely foreign to me. Like, whoa, we can't get the records. Like, not getting the records fast enough, I can understand, but not getting the number of records as fast as we wanted. It was like, well, we just need like whatever it was, 10,000. Like, it's going to be a second. Like, oh, really? Like, that's a...
Yeah.
And it just... That was kind of the first step of where I started hearing that more and more.
And you notice that more. You know what's interesting is it just occurred to me that timeline really coincides with when iPhones became ubiquitous, right? 2008 is when the iPhone, and 2009 is when it really hit the market en masse. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the unlimited availability of music on your phone made it more desirable to be intentional about a particular record.
Well, you got to keep in mind, too, how many people are really streaming at that point versus buying music.
Right.
So I think even now, most people don't stream music, at least via like Spotify or Apple Music. They're probably accessing YouTube and watching
for free, right,
clips that way. It's also odd to me that that time period when we started the label, I went back and did the math or figured it out that the grand opening of Third Man was within 1 week of the Dow Jones Industrial Average hitting its all-time historic low in the
wow.
middle of the recession.
Wow.
Which is, that would be probably a bad time to start a business, according to a lot of people.
Sure.
Some people might say that's the best time to start a business. To start a record label is never a good time to start a record label. It's not a good business model.
Yeah.
If you look at major labels or just any labels, you kind of have to throw a ton of shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the movie business. The best way to make $1 million in the movie business is to start with $10 million.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You start with 50 bands, and if one of them
right.
gets big, that pays for the 49 that you lost. I thought it was interesting where you said Third Man put a bet on the vinyl business, and I was thinking in my mind, I was like, oh, that's kind of a crude way to put it, but the music business, it is all kind of, it's bets and odds and hedging your losses, all of that stuff.
Well, I see it as a good thing. I mean, a bet is like your, I guess, depends on your interpretation of the word bet. I was thinking like you're backing that trend, or you're like putting your force and your, betting that that's going to work.
Yeah. My dad is a compulsive gambler, so when you say so bet something, you can think in a different way.
Fair enough. I guess you decided to invest in vinyl.
Exactly. Investment in vinyl is totally fair.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Otherwise, it's going to be like, man, this guy's an asshole. Awesome, man. Well, so how could that have backfired? Do you think that, that you guys invested in vinyl in Detroit? So I just came from, I was in the Cass Quarter store this last Tuesday, and so almost a week ago, and it's really cool. You have like the entire press, plant there, and you have the concert. So I went to Jonathan Richman's concert there. I'm actually coming here tonight. I got tickets.
Oh, for Lily,
I'm a member of your Vault thing, so I get all the emails and all that. But yeah, so it was really cool to see basically you guys investing in like later on. I also do want to talk about Detroit because it was fascinating for me as a first timer.
Yeah.
But how could that have backfired? Like, putting that, because that's a lot of money to put on for the vinyl pressing plant. Or did you know that there was going to be enough demand to fill that plant?
The hedging of the bet. We can go back to that analogy. Yeah, the hedging of the bet.
Investment.
Yeah. At the very least, we knew our demand alone, if we just pressed our own stuff in a worst case scenario, would be enough and would be appropriate to kind of float that place.
Okay.
That was not our intention. That's not our intention going into it. Yeah. The intention is really to be pressing for all kinds of people and lots of different, small labels, big labels.
Yeah.
Try to be able to accommodate fast turnaround times and really, really high quality.
Yeah.
So it could have backfired. I mean, all of this stuff, anything, people. I disagree with the sentiment, but a lot of people say, "Oh, vinyl is just a fad." No, fad is like mood rings or pet rocks or Rubik's Cube or something like that. This is kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
People have a strong connection to what vinyl means in their lives, how it integrates into their lives.
Yeah. I can relate. I don't have a TV and I have hundreds of records.
Yeah.
So, I hear you.
So it could backfire in, I don't know. I guess a war could start in the Middle East and oil prices could go crazy, and that's one thing I'm always cognizant of, is that we are working with a petroleum-based product,
right?
Which you can get from many number of different suppliers. But
you're talking about the pellets.
Yeah, the raw PVC pellets themselves. Yeah. And so that's on my radar.
Okay.
I haven't really seen, I see once in a while, pressing plants are really judicious in regards to when they up their prices.
Right.
So usually it's for every three price increases on the raw material end, you'll get one on the pressing plant end. Okay. So they usually, we'll swallow these two.
Yeah.
The next one, we got to raise our prices a little bit. So.
Interesting. So, related to that, so processes in the record pressing industry have gotten better, and waste has probably gone down significantly versus what it was like to press in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. How do you balance kind of tradition and what it's like to make a record and innovation in terms of making the process of a record better? The science of pressing a record has not really dramatically changed since in the past 50 years. Yeah.
It's the control of the processes that make it happen. So basically, you're taking raw vinyl and you're squeezing it very hard. No one's really improved upon that.
Okay.
The timing, the heating, the cool down, all of that stuff has been micromanaged to optimize quality, to optimize flatness. You don't want to warp record, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the machines that we use in Detroit is a machine called New Built.
Okay.
The company's called New Built. They're New Built machines. That's just basically taking the framework of an old machine that was built back in the day called a Fine Built.
Okay.
And using that model because it's a tried and true model. Lots of plants still use old Fine Builts from the 50s and 60s today.
Cool.
Keep them, maintained and up, that they can keep them running.
Yeah. So the innovation has come in the quality control and like the process, the tolerances in your manufacturing process more than it has in the
control. So a lot of the control levels now are, it used to be dials and gauges and all that stuff, and now it's a touchscreen computer.
Okay.
So you can adjust your timings by, half of a second versus, before you were probably just doing it eyeballing or looking at a stopwatch.
Wow.
Equivalent kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a more error-prone process.
Yeah, and so every, certain records,
yeah,
certain presses, you can't say there's one. You can't say every record needs to be compressed for 50 seconds.
Yeah.
Before it comes off and cools off. From one press to another, from one, the same machine, the same record, you could just have different tolerances. It's all the best thing I'd ever heard someone describe about a record press is that they have personalities.
Wow.
And
also the material, right? Because if you have colored vinyl, that's a slightly different consistency.
Absolutely. And at United, there was one machine, I forget the specifics about it, but a couple of years ago, asking about a machine, they're like, yeah, that machine just doesn't like colored vinyl. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting of just understanding that as something in what seems like a cut and dry business of just manufacturing.
Yeah.
That kind of almost voodoo attached to it it just doesn't like colored vinyl.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's like making guitars, like a lot of people, like every guitar is a personality, and even though the measurements are quote unquote the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm an amateur guitar maker, but I've interviewed a couple of really high-end, awesome people on this. Yeah, and it's definitely a process where they pay attention to that.
Well, yeah, when you look at when you read little bits about people talking about Stradivari or things like that, and there's no scientific reason why it makes sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You can
soul.
take the same wood from the same thing and to all the exact same measurements, but there's something that's not.
Yeah. Well, but there's
that's
something
in the
about,
air. That's something that's in the air. It's
and
an
the
intangible.
soul, the feeling for it too, right? Like Santa Cruz Guitars, I took a tour of their plant before this podcast was live, and Richard was really awesome, and he took me for 3 hours, and he literally taps every piece of wood and just kind of feels
hear the harmonics of it. Yeah,
it's crazy, man.
Yeah,
cool. So I'm a huge audio nerd. I actually have a reel-to-reel player and recorder and an 8-track.
Yeah.
On top of CDs and tapes, obviously. Do you see any other formats, like maybe cassette tapes or maybe even reel-to-reel, which has an audio quality that's freaking ridiculous and thick? Do you see any chance of that having any sort of a revival like vinyl did?
I always go back to the idea that, the first time we see grooves on a flat disc, so like vinyl as we know it today, that shows up in world history in about the 1890s.
Okay.
Now think of any other format that's come and gone since then. I don't think of vinyl coming back as some sort of just people wanting the old thing. I think that's part of it, but there's also so many other old things that they could choose from. People could be going crazy about wire recorders. They don't. People could be going crazy about.
Well, I thought I had every format. I don't even know what a wire recorder is.
But you just think about mini disc or ADAT. There's all these other, all these other formats. Yeah. I think the exotic format is just a small percentage of it. I think there's something. Because permutations of this question end up in my arena often. I think that there's something about there's just a perfectness that is almost heavenly, let's say, that just can't be topped in regards to the appeal. Now, there's definitely things that could be more convenient. Obviously, having an iPhone and being able to stream millions of songs at the press of a button, that's way more convenient than vinyl records. Just like flying from New York to Los Angeles is way more convenient than riding a bicycle.
Yes.
But people still ride bicycles. A wheel, 2 wheels and handlebars. That format created in whatever it is. I think the late 1800s.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, I don't know much about bicycles.
Yeah, I don't either. But I'm just gauging here. That way of making bicycles. That very simple.
Yeah.
Plot is still how bicycles are going to probably be made for all of time. And so I think in terms of physical music, vinyl records are the perfect way of doing
There's something a little romantic about the groove. So one of my favorite quotes is Keith Richards said that, once you record, you're immortal because you're in the grooves. There's something about like that 3-dimensional groove it kind of has a magic.
Yeah, digital just seems. I kind of classically tell people, I do a little bit of A&R here for putting out records by new bands.
Oh, cool.
But people always want, hey, I want you to hear this or blah blah blah. Check out my band. Can I send you a demo? And my line, my stock answer to everyone is, I'll listen to whatever you give me on vinyl.
Wow.
I'm not going to listen to a CD. I don't want to listen to your YouTube link or your Bandcamp, because I want people to actually put that effort in. We're sitting here and we're recording this podcast on a laptop.
Yeah.
Anyone can open up probably about any laptop made in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's built in with recording technology. And you can just set up. You don't even need mics like we're talking into. There's a built-in mic into that laptop. And you could sing and holler into it. And, with 2 clicks of the mouse, that's a recording.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that the bar for entry is so low is great in regards to democratization.
Yep.
But with democratization also comes a lot of
noise.
Perfect. I was going to struggle with what word to say. But when someone goes through the process of putting something on vinyl, self-releasing it or whatever, they understand. It's almost like they mean it more.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I was going to put out an EP until I heard your interview in preparation for this one, where you talk about the 45. Yeah. And somebody like I think Crate Diggers came to your house, right? And and you talk about the importance of the 45, and it's like if you can't do a 45 right. And it's like, then what are we even talking about?
Exactly.
And so I have I told you I played last night here in Nashville, and like I think now I'm actually, instead of putting out a 4-song EP, I think I'm going to do a 2-song 45 because I have 2 songs I really love, and I've been struggling to find 2 more to add to my EP. Absolutely. But instead of that, I think I'm going to like bring it back.
Every band artist you've ever loved, the first thing they did was a 45.
That's cool,
whether it's Elvis Presley or the Beatles, or the Rolling Stones, or the White Stripes, or Nirvana. Yeah, I think to get further into it, that the vinyl, the 7-inch 45 is the perfect format.
That's awesome.
LPs, I understand. Sometimes people have more to say in a context that expands outward. But for me, 7-inch is that is absolute perfection.
And you can always follow it up. You can do a 7-inch 45.
You can do 10 45s and then take the best of those and make that an album.
Yeah.
If you really are compelled by the LP or the album format. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I've actually been meeting lots of interesting people on this trip. I just interviewed this guy, Patrick Masterson, who runs a letterpress printing plant or shop in Louisville. Okay. And so we were talking about how people often will letterpress print their album covers or their 45 covers.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I don't know, kind of like picking up all these things along the way that are really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm sure you've seen, man, you work for a record label. Not just that, you work for. We're here in a room where probably there are a solid 1,000 or 2,000 records.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
in this room.
That's why we're so close together, right?
Exactly. What are some of the oddest, wackiest things you've seen in this business? I'm sure that there's no shortage of crazy stories.
I've heard. I've not seen it, but I had a friend of a friend who said they saw someone that was making picture discs. So the format where there's kind of there's your vinyl with the grooves in it, and underneath it is an image or a disc. Yep. Someone said that they had seen picture discs with human hair in them. Oh. And that sounded really cool. I want to see that. Flaming Lips did a record filled with blood that I've got a copy of here. We did a trade. I've seen other records. I saw someone was talking recently online. There was some band that did a sleeve that was covered in maggots.
Okay.
Some crazy, some
like live.
Like I think they were dead. They were like
Pressed maggots.
Glued or taped to the sleeve. Some sort of like super metal band.
That's awesome.
You know, I don't know what the next, you know, how far, that seems like it's about as far as you can go.
That's pretty wacky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So let's focus a little bit more on the business side of it. So in the time that you guys have been open, you've had plenty of time for things to go wrong and sideways, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell me about a time when things went really sideways and fucked up and you're like, man, this is, you know, I don't know how we're going to get out of this, but what did you do? How did you recover?
You know, one that always comes to mind is when we started out, the first LP we did was the Dead Weather Whorehound. And I think we pressed or at least sold through 20,000 copies really, really quickly. Maybe in about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And right after that, we had we were doing a White Stripes soundtrack to the documentary Under Great White Northern Lights, and we were doing LP for that. It's a double LP.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out what numbers to press on this Stripes title.
Okay.
And it wasn't very involved. It wasn't very deep. We weren't, you know, contemplating numbers or anything. It was just a very quick conversation. Me at my desk there, and I definitely remember Jack standing in the doorway here and saying, I said, well, you know, we've sold through 20,000 Dead Weather already. He's like, oh, let's do 20 on the White Stripes. That should be enough to at least start.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And what I hadn't known or taken into consideration, I probably should have known, was that we only had North American rights for the White Stripes title. And so our initial, we had worldwide rights on Dead Weather. So our initial orders for the White Stripes record were 10,000. And I've got another 10,000 sitting at the pressing plant, like the pressing plant calling me up and saying, hey, you've got all these pallets here. Can you do something? I'm like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
You brought them all here.
Well, you know, we had our office manager at the time. I kept on saying, hey, we need a storage space. We own only the one building now. We've got the warehouse next door. Yeah. Which could have, I guess, theoretically accommodated what we had. Yeah. And I just felt this was a physical manifestation of a supreme oversight on my end. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I'll get the office manager, leave her out of it. Yeah. I'll go find the storage space. Yeah. I'll go get the truck loaded. I'll go unload the truck. I'll go lock it up, and that will just be, you know, this chain around my neck.
And you work after the day.
Yeah. And I was so bummed about it. Like, I just felt like, this is early on. You know, the first invoice I saw for Third Man was the sleeves that we ordered for Whorehound. Yeah. That first Dead Weather record. And I think this, you know, when the total came to was something like $75,000, and my heart, you know, I actually felt palpitations, like, oh,
because it's cash on the shelf. I mean, it's not.
Well, it's just, I'm coming from a label that I was running out of my bedroom where, like I was kind of describing before, the big question was, do you press 300 or 500 copies? Yeah. And that's, you know, I'm never getting a bill larger than $1,000. And when I saw that 7.5 followed by 3 zeros, I thought I had to pay it. Like, I thought this was me, like, on the line. Like, if this doesn't get paid, like, it's all my ass. Fuck. So those 10,000 copies, I just thought we were just going to sit in that storage place for 15 years.
Yeah. So what happened? Did you guys saw them
Well,
through?
the vinyl revival happened, and everyone kept on reordering, and probably in about that happened in 2011. Yeah. Probably by 2013, definitely by 2014, we'd sold through them all. Wow. And that kind of also informed further, which was, well, shit, if you can have the space to store it, it's going to sell. Right. And so that's definitely influenced our decisions or our thoughts and ideas behind warehousing and storage spaces and pressing numbers.
But you have to think about working capital too, right? Because like it's actually Patrick from the letterpress printing shop in Louisville has a sign that his dad had in a small business in his shop that says inventory is gold. Yeah. And I thought that was awesome because it's true. I mean, how do you, actually that's a really good question. How do you think about the balance of like, because you have the setup costs of your run, right? And then you have the storage and working capital costs of having a warehouse full of inventory.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
One release to the next, it's completely different.
Okay.
So try to just have accurate gauges. We keep everything in print too.
Okay.
So sometimes it might be easier if we said, hey, we're only pressing this one time and we're only doing X amount of copies.
Right.
That might spur people to buy more records.
Sure.
On the front end. But ultimately, you just have to be really, really aware of what demand is, which is constantly fluctuating. And also just constantly be hustling to try to get those records where they need to be and make sure people are buying what you think are these.
But you also keep
records.
the masters, right? Because you guys have like, you can do reissues.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I'm fond of saying. You can always repress a record.
Yeah.
You can never take copies back to the pressing plant and get a refund.
Right.
So usually try to err on the lower end of things.
Right.
On releases that might not be. Their sales numbers might not be so evident.
Right.
On something like a Jack White related release, err on the high side so that you're not stuck without copies for any period of time.
I should think about that when I put out my 45, so I don't end up with a bunch of
exactly.
Also, do you have little 45 crates in my bedroom?
No, I would for anyone start with 200 copies.
200,
and you go through 200. Once you have all those things. You have your plates made and you have the labels set up and all that. To press another, it's constantly tempting because when you look at the difference between 200 and 300, it's only $50. But there might not be another 100 people that want your shit.
Yeah.
You can always go back and make that 100 if they sprout up in time.
Makes sense.
Or it just matters how much space you have under your bed for storage.
Very cool. When you think about all your experience, so how many people do you have today at Third Man?
We've got 30 here in Nashville, and I think another 40 total in Detroit.
Okay, so 70 people, and that's grown over time. I mean, you said initially...
We started with 2.
Yeah, 2 people.
That was 8 years ago.
When you think about all that time in developing this business, what would you say is the number one lesson that you've learned about running a small business that's growing and it's,
I don't know if it's a lesson as much as a approach, which is you have to... remain flexible.
Okay.
Any ideas that you come in that are hard, fast, intractable are ultimately going to be the ones that end up holding you back.
Yeah.
I think of flexibility as is the key to making anything work.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I have a specific behind that, but I usually use it describing a space we have here. So we have the room that we do our live performances.
Yeah.
We also do art shows, and we also do panel discussions, and we also show movies there.
Actually, I'm coming tonight to the Lily May release show.
Yeah, so we've got all of that. If we just said, no, this is just the live room, and we only do live performances here, there would be so much that we just kind of would never enter our orbit. And I think that's for the worst.
Yeah.
So the same with how you run the shop. We can sell this. We don't have to have too many rules per se. So when we started out, it was we only sell our own records,
right?
And that's still for the most part how we operate. But then someone had an idea. It was like, what if we set up a shelf in the shop that's a rotating cast of different labels called labels we love, and we'll order releases from them so people can not only looking at Third Man stuff, but like somewhat curated in regards to what we bring in.
Right. And you've gone even a step further because you encourage bands that are coming through town to record here, right? I saw in your Detroit shelves, there's a section that was like bands that are coming through and just recorded it like a 45.
Yeah. I mean, and any kind of, just trying to promote.
How do the licensing rights work for that? If somebody's signed to another label and they want to do a 45 with you, how does that even work?
It's different from one label to another.
Okay.
A 45 is usually pretty easy to make happen. When we're talking live records, that can be a lot more. There's just a lot more cooks in the kitchen.
Sure.
A lot more concerns.
Yeah.
But we, for the most part, people get it. The live record, it's mainly meant to promote the band.
Sure.
In conjunction with us reaching out into our fan base and the world that we inhabit.
Makes sense.
So
Do you guys do all of that with the whole like pure tape to wax process, basically never touching digital, right? Because you guys record to 2-inch tape, right?
We do. What we do is we record primarily direct to acetate. So from mixing board to lathe.
Yeah.
We can cut to tape if someone is scared from recording. Because when we record direct to disc. There's no overdubs, there's no redo, there's no edits.
Right.
So if people are like, I want to be able to, that first song might be a clunker, they want to be able to edit it out, we can record to tape.
And then cut afterwards.
And then we'll be set up to do that in Detroit as well.
Okay.
Very shortly.
Yeah. So it's basically a more advanced process than what you have in your booths.
Absolutely.
Right.
100%.
Because I did that a couple of times in Detroit. I'm going to do it on the way out again.
Nice.
So. Very cool. Where do you guys want to go in the next 10 years? I mean, you've been wildly successful as really one of the best things to happen to music and to live music in the last 10 years. And I say that 100% honestly. I have many of your records, and so do my friends.
Thanks.
So it's awesome. It's a real honor to be here.
Yeah.
Where do you guys see yourselves going in the next 10 years? I mean, it's been my experience that somebody with the kind of ambition that you guys have, it's cool to relish in what you have, but also you guys are want to do more. So what do you guys want to do?
Well, I think the pressing plant, that's a very big step for us.
Yeah.
Just in terms of investment and just support to do that. That's for the entirety of the vinyl industry and folks that like vinyl and want to be making it.
Good.
For us as a label, I think we're wanting to be. I think for the first few years, everything we did basically was, we were primarily just the outlet for what Jack's creativity brought to the table.
Yeah.
And that's great, and that's enough to run a label.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't have to rely on that.
Right.
We should be able to, if Jack's not putting out a record this year, we should be able to just say, that's fine. We've got other things in place. We've got other artists that are equally successful in their worlds.
Yeah.
And that be, the goal is kind of to just become Third Man Records, not Jack White's Third Man Records.
Yeah, makes sense. I think you guys are well on your way to do that.
I think so. Last year with the Margot Price record, which is a record Jack didn't perform on, he didn't produce, his name's not on it.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, I just got in your vault package her live performance in DC.
Yeah,
she's great. Just so. I've been sharing her with a lot of people because she's got this sort of like. Almost, I mean, you can hear like the inspiration of like the Patsy Clines in there.
Absolutely.
But also it's like it's like a really interesting mix of like the old country with like the new like Americana revival kind of stuff. So it's 100%. really cool stuff.
But so that, that's a great example of, that has nothing to do with Jack. And that's to her, for her, Third Man is the label. It's not the label that she created. It's not the label that, it's the label that signed her and supports her.
Yeah.
And so, ideally, we have more successes in that realm. And
That's
so,
awesome.
like you're talking about Lily Mae today.
Yeah.
Definitely, she's well on her way.
Yeah.
Artists like Craig Brown or other artists that were.
Yeah, he just came out with his record last week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
So all that stuff. When Jack stuff comes in, it's obviously going to be a big seller, and it's obvious. Takes up a lot of.
He keeps coming up with more. I mean, that record, the live acoustic live from Idaho.
Yeah,
man, so wild. Like he does like the Hank Williams songs and like all that stuff, and it's like really he keeps coming up with new ways to do weird shit. That's awesome.
Absolutely, I think he said at that point, he was so invigorated by those shows.
Yeah,
he's like, man, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like he'd never thought, or he's just kind of always got other things that are at the forefront of his mind that he never thought, let's just do a small acoustic tour.
Yeah, that's how I feel about this podcast. This podcast has reinvigorated my own energy with my business because you get to like meet so many interesting people and do stuff. So
well, when you meet someone that's that you have a good conversation with or that has good ideas or interesting ideas, you walk away and it immediately makes you think, how do I apply this to my life? How does this this energy that this person has, how can I take some of that and infuse it into my life?
For sure, man.
And that's a good example of what we're trying to do with these other artists.
That's sweet. Love that. Let's talk a little bit about Detroit. So you were from there.
Yeah.
How do you split your time between Nashville and Detroit, or do you live mostly here?
I live here 100% and go up to Detroit, for work to check on the plant and other things going on there. Maybe once a month.
Yeah.
Probably not more than that.
Yeah. So I had never been to Detroit, and I'd heard the stories about how it was I had a really rough time, and it was to me very impactful. To basically you drive around, you're in a what looks like a okay neighborhood, and then you make one wrong turn, and it looks like the entire street got firebombed 20 years ago and never rebuilt.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's your take? How is Third Man involved in kind of making a difference in Detroit? And how do you guys think? How does that come into your decision to maybe have a pressing plant there instead of here?
Yeah. There's already a really great, awesome pressing plant here in Nashville. I don't think Nashville needed a second plant, first off.
Yeah.
And Detroit is where we're from. And Detroit is a place where, you drop in 40, 50 jobs in Detroit, $15 minimum wage starting.
Yeah.
Benefits, proper living wage.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, man.
For it's not building a new car factory.
Yeah.
But for those 50 people,
For sure.
that's a life. That's a livelihood.
Yeah. And I think the people who choose to live in Detroit have this kind of like, there's a whole non-rouge thing, which is like the kind of like spirit of like the spirit of survival and the spirit. But I think the people I met in Detroit have this like indomitable, like almost like it felt to me like what you would have encountered in like 1800s Arizona and the Old West, kind of like people who are willing to deal with shit and like make stuff happen,
Absolutely. I think I couldn't put it better myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And what's it like to do? What are the differences in doing business in Nashville versus Detroit in terms of both the business community and how you relate to other businesses and the government?
It's all positive on across both cities. It's just different.
Yeah.
In Detroit, I think we were immediately on the radar, probably because of the success that we've experienced in Nashville.
Yeah.
In Nashville, starting out, I think we were kind of under the radar for a while.
Okay.
Of not really being catching anyone's attention, which was not bad or good. It's just how it was.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of music.
There's a lot of music. There's a lot of record labels.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything that they'd never seen before.
Yeah.
But to open a manufacturing pressing plant in Detroit, that caught people's attention. And we're in the same building as Shinola.
That's right.
So that they already have a ton of attention focused on them. So it's just it seems like in Detroit.
Yeah.
It's a little more unique in Detroit, but ultimately, it's all the same family here.
Yeah.
So Detroit, Nashville, ultimately, it doesn't seem that different from the interior of how we operate or what works.
Okay.
The environs and the surroundings might be a little different, or the regulation or red tape, but ultimately, it's all the same, really.
Very cool. Awesome. Is there anything else that you want our audience to know about your business? Where can people find you? You guys are really active on a lot of social media, so Instagram.
Yeah, you can find us Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. All that stuff is pretty, the first thing that the first search result for Third Man Records will be us. No, keep buying vinyl records. I got 2 miles to feed. I got 3 miles to feed at home. So
there you go. Well, congratulations on that. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and thanks for welcoming me here at Third Man Records.
Yeah, my time.
All right,
thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to Small Business War Stories. If you enjoy the show, share it with a friend, or you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our blog at blog.proven.com. If you have an idea for us, we'd love to hear it. Please email us at podcast@proven.com. See you next time. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.